Family? A woman who walked out on us is just a stranger. Go back. You're not family to us anymore.
What? I was completely dumbfounded by those words. I had gone through great lengths to take a day off and come back for her birthday celebration, but I never imagined I'd be greeted with such verbal abuse. And that wasn't the end of Karen's outrageous behavior.
Did you really think buying this stuff would make everything okay?
With those words, she kicked the gifts I had brought. The pile of carefully chosen presents tumbled to the ground with a loud thud. Karen then mercilessly stomped on them. Unforgivable. That was the only emotion that welled up inside me. This wasn't the time to let sadness or shock consume me. I was an adult now, having just celebrated my milestone birthday, yet Karen was still acting as selfishly as ever. Determined to teach her a lesson, I made up my mind to take action. My name is Anna Miller. I'm 28 years old. Growing up, I was known as a cheerful and lively person, loved by neighbors and relatives alike. But even I had my struggles. One of them was the fact that I didn't have any siblings. Among my friends, I was the only one who was an only child. I desperately wanted a little sister. Looking back now, my parents weren't exactly young when I was born. My mom was 32, and my dad was 37. I was always meant to be an only child. Even though I constantly begged for a sibling, having a second child couldn't have been an easy decision for my parents. But perhaps my relentless requests swayed them. When I was 8, my wish finally came true, and my baby sister was born. We named her Karen. In fact, I was so thrilled about her arrival that I even chose her name. I welcomed Karen with open arms and was overjoyed to finally become a big sister. Thus, I grew up as the older sibling in a family of 2 sisters. I adored Karen. As a baby, I'd change her diapers, feed her baby food, and take care of her like a little mom. Karen was more attached to me than our parents and would follow me everywhere when she was little. But that changed when Karen started elementary school and she began to push me away.
You're so annoying. Stop picking me up.
At the time, I was in high school. Since my school let out around the same time Karen's dance class ended, it became my routine to pick her up and walk home together. But Karen started to hate me coming to get her.
I can't make it on time.
Since Mom worked part-time, it was impossible for her to pick up Karen after dance class. I was the only one who could do it, but Karen's complaints caused trouble for Mom.
I can walk home by myself.
But we agreed someone has to pick you up, right?
Just lie and say someone came to get me.
Karen even suggested breaking the dance school's rules, which clearly required parents to pick up their elementary-aged kids. When we signed her up for the class, we agreed in writing that an adult would always pick her up while she was in elementary school. We couldn't just go and break the rules on a whim. Maybe Karen was starting to care more about how others saw her. After discussing it with Mom, we came up with a compromise. I'd pick Karen up, but then follow her home from a distance to give her a sense of independence. Karen reluctantly agreed but kept up her bossy attitude, telling me that I have to stay at least 10 feet away from her. Mom and I adored Karen too much to scold her for this attitude and ended up spoiling her instead. Even as a middle schooler, Karen continued to act cold toward me. But things started to change when she got to high school.
Hey, guess what, Anna? I got a boyfriend.
She came to me, unable to hide her excitement. Though Karen had always been passionate about dance, she lacked enthusiasm for anything else. Hearing that she liked someone and wanted to share it with me made me as happy as if it were my own experience. Congrats. What's he like?
He's super cool. Oh, but don't tell Mom or Dad, okay?
Of course. I'll keep it a secret. For the first time, we were having the kind of sisterly conversation I had always dreamed of. I was so overjoyed I nearly cried. From then on, Karen often shared things about her boyfriend with me. One night, she came to my room and said,
Hey, Anna, can I go see my boyfriend real quick?
It was already 9 p.m. No way could she go out at this hour. Still, I understood her desire to see him.
Please.
In the end, I gave in once again, but that only encouraged Karen's selfish behavior. Night after night, she started sneaking out to meet her boyfriend. It seemed she had also begun skipping her dance classes. When I noticed, I tried to confront her, but she didn't take it well. Eventually, Karen started sneaking out without telling me, making it even harder to keep her in check. One day, I received a phone call. It was from the police. I froze, fearing something had happened to Karen, but they simply asked me to come pick her up. Did something happen to my sister? I asked nervously, and the officer responded in a calm, professional tone. Apparently, they had noticed Karen multiple times in the past and warned her. Each time, Karen pretended that she was on the way home from tutoring or dance class and managed to avoid further trouble. But since they kept encountering her, this time they decided to take her into custody. Not wanting our father to find out, Karen had given the police my contact info, leading to this call. I rushed to the station. When I arrived, a stern-looking male officer glanced at me and asked to confirm my identity.
Are you the older sister?
Yes. I'm sorry my sister caused trouble.
If I may, where are your parents?
The officer seemed a little skeptical that I, someone just a few years into adulthood, had come to pick her up. Although having an adult family member pick her up was acceptable, the officer clearly wanted her parents to handle the situation.
That's why I told you, my dad's in the hospital, and my mom's staying with him full-time, so they can't come.
Karen lied to the officer. She only contacted me to avoid our parents finding out, but there she was spinning a story. Sighing, I opened my mouth to reprimand her.
She also came all the way here, even though she has work tomorrow. Let's just go home quickly.
Her words silenced me. She was right. I had work the next day. If I called out her lie now, they might insist on contacting our parents, and we'd be stuck here even longer. Besides, I felt partly responsible for not stopping her the first time she started sneaking out. Though I knew her lies were wrong, I neither denied nor confirmed them. The officer reluctantly let her go, telling me to ensure I talk to her about her behavior. I can't believe you got taken into police custody. This is too much. I scolded Karen on the way home. But my words didn't seem to faze her. She kept sneaking out, getting into trouble, and calling me to pick her up. By the 5th time I went to the police station, my patience had run out. Karen, you're still a high schooler. You need to live like one instead of trying to act beyond your years. This isn't normal, being called to the station over and over. You should break up with that boyfriend who keeps dragging you out late like this.
Why do you have to tell me how to live my life? What does acting like a high schooler even mean? I'm just living how I want to live.
I'm saying you need to live within your means. Staying out late isn't you, and I really don't think your boyfriend respects you if this keeps happening. Karen clicked her tongue in frustration, clearly annoyed by my lecture. Sitting in my car's passenger seat, she stared out the window with an exasperated look. This will be the last time I come pick you up without telling Mom and Dad.
What?
I can't keep covering for you forever. This situation isn't doing Karen any good. As expected, Karen complained, but I steeled myself and stayed firm. Everything I did was for her benefit. However, my intentions didn't seem to reach her. The proof came a few days later when Karen was once again taken into police custody, and I received another call.
Are you Karen's sister? I'm sorry to bother you, but could you please come to pick her up?
I'd become so familiar with the officer's voice that I could imagine his frustrated expression as soon as I heard it. But this time, I spoke clearly. I'm sorry, but I won't be coming to pick her up anymore.
What?
Please tell Karen to call our father herself. Thank you. The officer sounded flustered, but I ended the call after saying my piece. Karen must have heard about it from the police. Soon after, my phone was flooded with messages from her calling me stupid or useless, and accusing me of abandoning her. It would have been easy to help her, just like I always had. But I thought about what was best for Karen and quietly turned off my phone. That night was chaotic in our house. Our parents, called by the police, went to pick up Karen, only to lecture her in the living room until morning. Karen's defiant voice echoed through the house, keeping me from sleeping. But my parents' anger was justified. They thought Karen had been in her room, so they felt utterly betrayed. Knowing this, I couldn't deny my own responsibility for letting things slide until now. That night, I sat beside Karen as she was scolded and honestly told our parents everything. I should have talked to you both from the start. I'm sorry. Unsurprisingly, both Karen and I were thoroughly reprimanded by our parents. It was embarrassing to be scolded at this age, but I realized my mistakes, and I hoped Karen did too. Despite everything, my parents and I chose to trust her again. The following year, Karen entered her senior year of high school. Whether she broke up with her boyfriend or not, her nights of sneaking out and getting taken into police custody came to an end. She became dedicated to her dance classes again, and both my parents and I felt relieved. Around that time, I decided to start a new chapter in my life. I planned to change jobs and move out of our family home. It would be my first time living alone after always living with my family. Although I had my doubts about starting a new job and living independently, I made the decision after consulting with my parents. As my mom and I searched for an apartment and prepared for the move, Karen confronted me.
You're moving out? That's unbelievable. You don't care about me at all, do you?
Her words shocked me because I didn't see things that way at all. Of course that's not true.
But you wouldn't pick me up from the police anymore. You ratted me out to mom and dad. And now that I've started acting a little better, you're leaving?
You have your own life, Karen, and Anna has hers. This isn't something you get to interfere with.
My mom was stunned by Karen's words. But Karen continued to argue.
That's exactly what you're doing. You think I'm fine now, so you're dumping two old people on me. Let me just say, I'm not taking care of any old folks.
What are you even saying? I shouted at Karen. Sure, our parents weren't young anymore. But they weren't old enough to be called elderly, and I had no intention of dumping them on her. My mom, speechless and in shock, was at a loss for words. It must have hurt deeply. You're the one who's always causing trouble for mom and dad, Karen. Don't you dare get into any more trouble with the police after I move out.
I don't need to hear that from someone who's leaving.
From that day on, Karen stopped talking to me. No matter how many times I tried to speak to her, she ignored me. Though I worried about what would happen, moving day eventually came and I left home. Life after that wasn't easy. I struggled to adjust to living alone and to my new job, leaving me exhausted every day. With the distance to my parents' house requiring a flight, visiting wasn't an option. While I was busy with work, Karen enrolled in a dance academy and eventually turned 18. For her 18th birthday, I wanted to celebrate with the family, so I arranged time off work. To attend her big celebration, I even worked through the holidays and managed to get a week off, finally making my long-awaited trip back home. carrying gifts for the family in both hands. I boarded the plane and rushed home. I arrived at the house the night before Karen's big celebration. I had been looking forward to seeing her in her formal gown. But what awaited me at home were Karen's heartless words.
What are you doing here?
Karen asked coldly as soon as she saw me. Despite her frosty tone, I was happy to see her and replied cheerfully. Karen, you've grown so much. I came back to celebrate your big day. Tomorrow's the big event, right? Let's have a family celebration tonight. But Karen sneered at me.
Family? A woman who abandoned us isn't family. You're a stranger. Get lost.
What? I was left speechless. I never imagined she would lash out at me like this. And her behavior didn't stop there.
Oh, so you thought bringing this would make everything better?
She kicked the gifts I had brought. With a loud crash, the stack of gifts tumbled over. Karen showed no mercy, stomping on them with her feet.
What are you doing?
My mom, who had been preparing dinner in the kitchen, rushed into the living room and yelled at Karen. However, Karen arrogantly tilted her chin up and glared at me before stomping out of the room with heavy steps. I was still in shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened, staring at the trampled gifts on the floor.
You went through all that trouble to buy these for us.
My mom's voice was filled with sadness as she picked up the crushed packages. The cookies Mom liked, the snacks I had brought for Dad, and even the chocolates for Karen were all smashed beyond recognition. How did she turn into someone who could act like this?
I'm sorry. The truth is, Karen's been in another rebellious phase for the past year. She even throws away the meals I make for her.
What? Why didn't you tell me sooner?
I didn't want to worry you.
As Mom said this, tears welled up in her eyes. I couldn't forgive Karen. That was the only feeling left in me. There was no time to wallow in sadness or shock. Now that Karen was supposed to be an adult, her selfishness needed to be dealt with, and I resolved to do something about it. That evening, only my mom, Dad, and I shared a meal together. Even though the snacks Karen had smashed were deformed beyond recognition, Dad smiled and told me that those were still tasty. His cheerful demeanor was a small comfort, but my anger toward Karen only grew. The next day was Karen's big day. Her 18th birthday celebration.
Mom, hurry up or I'll be late for my salon appointment.
Karen snapped at Mom early in the morning, clearly expecting her to be her chauffeur.
Is that the way you ask for a favor?
Dad scolded her, but it was like talking to a brick wall. Even if I had been there, it might not have made any difference. Still, I couldn't help but feel guilty that things had gotten this way after I moved out. In the end, Karen didn't send me a single picture of herself in her formal gown. She went to her celebration, avoiding me entirely that day. By the time she returned home, it was late at night. The next morning, we crossed paths briefly. But she left without saying a word. While I admired her dedication to her dance classes, she didn't seem to understand that it was thanks to the family's support that she could pursue them at all. Later that morning, after calculating the timing of her class schedule, I called her school. Hello, this is Karen Miller's sister. I'm calling about her tuition payments.
Yes, how can we assist you?
I'd like to stop the payments starting this month.
Are you looking to change the payment account?
And in response, I said firmly, no. I'm saying I won't be paying anymore. Please bill her directly from now on.
Understood. We'll stop the automatic withdrawals for now.
The administrator's hesitant response suggested. She didn't understand why I was doing this, but she didn't press further. I finalized the cancellation of the payments and allowed myself a slight smile. About an hour later, Karen called Mom. She must have heard about the tuition situation.
Mom? I was told I'd have to pay my own tuition now? What's going on?
Karen shouted furiously. It's not Mom.
Is that you, Anna?
Realizing it was me on the phone, Karen raised her voice even louder.
Stay out of this, Anna. I want to talk to Mom.
What are you misunderstanding? I'm the one who called the school to stop the tuition payments.
What authority do you have to do something like that?
I could practically see Karen's face turning red with anger. Well, I was the one paying for your tuition. That gives me the authority, doesn't it?
What do you mean?
It seemed Karen hadn't realized I'd been the one paying her tuition. The truth is, I switched jobs for Karen's sake. After breaking up with her high school boyfriend, Karen threw herself back into her passion for dance.
I want to go to a dance school after graduating high school. Then, I want to study abroad.
But there was one problem. The tuition for the dance school Karen wanted to attend was significantly higher than average. Still, the school was accessible despite the distance. Excellent facilities and opportunities for overseas study. Many of its alumni had become renowned dancers, making it the perfect environment for pursuing her dream. This school was Karen's chance to chase her aspirations. However, as much as I wanted her to attend, our family couldn't afford it.
Karen might need to look for a different school.
Yeah, even if we managed to cover the tuition, there's no way we could afford the study abroad expenses after that. It's better not to give her false hope.
Before switching jobs, my parents and I held a family meeting. My parents decided they would encourage Karen to give up on the idea, but I didn't want her to abandon her dream. But this is something Karen truly wants to do.
We understand that, but
All right. I'll switch jobs. I'll pay for Karen's tuition. My parents were stunned by my suggestion.
Anna, you don't have to go that far. You have your own life to live.
Mom tried to dissuade me, but I was genuinely happy that Karen had found a dream, especially one connected to her lifelong passion for dance. I want Karen to grow into someone amazing. I truly believe she can achieve that through dance. This is as much for me as it is for her. That's how I ended up changing jobs. We decided as a family that my parents would save for her study abroad expenses while I covered her tuition. Together, we would support Karen's dream.
I can't believe this. You switched jobs. For me?
After hearing the full story, Karen murmured in disbelief. It was true. I had asked my parents to keep it a secret from Karen because I didn't want her to feel pressured by the fact that I was paying for her tuition. That said, even if I hadn't been paying Karen's tuition, our parents would have covered it, so I couldn't understand her attitude toward Mom. You might not believe it, but it's the truth. However, I've decided to stop supporting your dream.
What? Wait, you can't.
Someone like you, who disrespects your family, won't inspire anyone with your dancing anyway. Harsh words, maybe, but anything less wouldn't get through to Karen. On the other end of the line, Karen burst into tears. I could hear the sound of a chime over the phone. It must have been the start of her lesson, but Karen just continued sobbing. Well, I'm hanging up now, I said with a smirk and ended the call.
Do you think she'll be okay?
Even now, Mom was worried about Karen, but I told her. Coddling her won't help. This is something that will benefit her in the long run. Mom nodded, though I understood her concern. Since I'd abruptly hung up on Karen, I planned to talk to her again when she came home. About 30 minutes later, the front door opened.
I'm home.
You're back. What about school? Surprised, I ran to the door and called out to Karen. She stood there, her face contorted.
Anna, I'm sorry.
And then, right there in the entryway, she broke down crying loudly. Her face was pale, and she collapsed in tears. Judging by her state, she must have been so rattled by the news of the tuition cutoff that she left school early. It took something like this for her to realize her own foolishness. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just exasperated. What are you apologizing for? If it's about the tuition, I'm not changing my mind.
No. How am I supposed to live now?
It was as though she was appealing to my conscience, but I smirked in response. How? You've got a healthy body and that thick skin of yours. Get a job and figure it out.
You're horrible. You're not the Anna I used to know.
Karen's shock was written all over her face as she glared at me. She must have thought she could say or do anything to me and I'd forgive her. And, honestly, she wasn't wrong until now. I know it all too well myself. But that's part of what made Karen so selfish. But now, I had no intention of spoiling or forgiving her anymore. Horrible? Who's the horrible one here? You disrespected Mom and Dad, treated me like trash, and even called me a stranger. Now, suddenly, I'm your sister again? Don't make me laugh. Karen fell silent, her lips pressed tightly together. If you're really that passionate about dancing, you have options. Take a year off and save up for tuition, transfer to a different school, or even leave the country and start fresh abroad. There are plenty of ways.
But I have to graduate from that school first.
She started muttering complaints and excuses under her breath. As I sat in the living room and my mom quietly watched from the doorway, the more Karen spoke, the clearer her spoiled mindset became, leaving us both exasperated. When Karen finally ran out of excuses, I laughed. As long as you keep making excuses like that, you'll never accomplish anything. Karen must have realized I truly had no intention of helping her anymore. She looked up quickly and turned her pleading eyes toward Mom.
Mom, please, say something to Anna.
It was as if she was trying to make me the villain and begging for support. Mom let out a heavy sigh at Karen's words.
Anna's right. We've been too lenient with you.
What?
Neither your dad nor I are going to help you anymore. You need to reflect on your behavior and figure things out for yourself.
Even Mom, usually so kind, seemed resolute in her decision to stop coddling Karen. Karen's face grew pale, and she collapsed to the floor in tears. It must have felt utterly hopeless, realizing there was no one left to come to her rescue no matter how much she cried. Karen had spent so long demanding from her family without ever considering how much support we'd given her to pursue her dream. Although I was the one who pulled back first, I believed this setback was something Karen needed to experience. In the end, Karen dropped out of school. Without tuition payments, there was no other option. It was a 3-year program. There was no way Karen or my parents could cover the remaining year and 3 months of tuition. But then, there was a glimmer of hope.
I've decided to try on my own. I'm going to study abroad to chase my dream.
Karen reached out to me with this declaration. Finally, she had resolved to work toward her dream on her own. If she was ready to put in the effort, I wanted to help her. With that in mind, I and my colleague, Kevin Cameron, began using our connections to research French dance schools, find affordable housing, and look for jobs that would allow Karen to balance work and dance. Incidentally, the company I had transferred to had branches in France, which had been a factor in my decision. The higher salary was appealing, but I also felt maintaining ties with France through work would allow me to support Karen if needed. Kevin, who had recently been transferred to France, even took the time to help Karen. I was deeply grateful. When I shared details about the dance schools and housing options, Karen was thrilled. It might be tough to balance work and dance studies, but do your best.
Thank you. I've realized how much I was relying on everyone before. But I'm going to achieve my dream, no matter what.
3 months later, after all the preparations were complete, Karen moved to France alone. We might not see each other often now, but I could only hope she would thrive there. Have you settled into your new place? How's work going? About a month after Karen's move, I reached out to her. Karen was working as a server at a cafe. The cafe was in a location with many American employees, including some from my own company, and they had been looking for someone who spoke English. This, too, was something Kevin had told me about, and I had introduced it to Karen. However, Karen's response to my question was hesitant.
Well, it just didn't feel like the right fit, so I quit.
What? You quit? What are you going to do now?
I'm looking for another job. Don't worry, I've got money.
Karen said this so casually. It was true that both my parents and I had given her a little extra money as a farewell gift, but it wasn't enough to sustain her for long. Ignoring my concern, Karen continued.
I didn't come here to work. I came here to dance. Dancing comes first.
Shouldn't working come first to support her dancing? The thought rose to my throat, but I swallowed it. Karen had decided to try on her own, and meddling too much wouldn't help. Accepting her reasoning, I ended the call. But later that night, I received an unexpected and shocking call.
Anna, the money's gone from our account.
It was Mom, her voice full of distress. What? What do you mean? Tell me everything.
The money your dad and I had saved for our retirement and for Karen's study abroad is gone. I went to the bank today to update the passbook, and it wasn't there.
Mom explained, crying as she spoke. Where's Dad? Is he with you?
Yes.
I asked her to let Dad take the phone. He would be calmer, and I needed to hear the details from him. When I asked Dad for an explanation, he responded in a steady voice.
Actually, it seems Karen was the one withdrawing the money.
What are you talking about?
I told the bank we didn't remember making any withdrawals. They investigated and found that over the past 3 months, after Karen dropped out of school, she'd been withdrawing small amounts over several days to avoid suspicion.
I was speechless. Dad confirmed with the bank that the withdrawal slips were in Karen's handwriting, leaving no doubt it was her doing. Recalling my recent conversation with Karen, I realized her claim about having enough money made sense now. So much for her trying on her own. After finishing the call with Dad, I immediately called Karen, driven by anger.
What is it this early in the morning?
Karen answered, her voice annoyed. It was night here, but clearly morning where Karen was. Not that it mattered. Did you steal Mom and Dad's money? I yelled at Karen, who sounded drowsy from sleep. Karen replied with an incredulous voice, but quickly seemed to grasp my accusation, and then she laughed.
Oh, so you finally figured it out.
What do you think you're doing?
Well, you made me quit school. So this is the least you could do for me, right? Besides, it's their fault for leaving the money around so carelessly. Anyway, I'm going back to bed now.
Karen had the audacity to brazenly justify her actions, spew insults, and then hang up the phone. At that point, I couldn't hold back my anger anymore. Determined to teach her a lesson, I made a call to someone. 3 days later, Karen called me in a panic.
Anna, that Kevin guy from your company took my money.
Her voice was frantic, a complete change from her usual arrogance. I smiled to myself, knowing my plan had worked. What? What do you mean?
I'm telling you. Kevin, the guy from your company who helped me with my apartment and was so nice to me. He came over yesterday, and I mentioned I kept my money at home. He said it wasn't safe for a single woman to have that much cash at home, so he offered to keep it safe for me. So I gave it to him, but when I asked for it back because I got worried, he said he wouldn't return it.
Karen rattled off her story in a single breath. Her carelessness had actually helped me. Oh, well, that's because I asked him to take it.
What? That's theft, Anna? Even if you asked him, it's still stealing. I'm going to report this to your company.
Karen was livid, yelling at me, but I couldn't help but laugh. Good luck with that. Even if you report it, you can't press charges against him.
That's ridiculous. He stole my money. I'm the victim here.
Well, Kevin happens to be your brother-in-law. Family theft isn't considered a crime. Karen fell silent at my words. She probably couldn't comprehend what I had just said. I figured it was best to let her stew in confusion, but I decided to explain anyway. Kevin Cameron is my husband. That makes him your brother-in-law.
What? You're married? Since when?
About a month ago. As I spoke, I rested a hand on my stomach. A few months ago, I had found out I was pregnant with Kevin's child. Kevin and I had been dating since I started my new job, and we had been together for 2 years. When I got pregnant, we decided to get married, but shortly after, Kevin was transferred to France for work. I couldn't leave my job immediately, and we hadn't had a wedding yet, but we filed our marriage paperwork for the sake of our child. Since Karen was just starting her new life, I hadn't thought it was necessary to tell her. Even so, Kevin had gone out of his way to look after Karen and support her as she adjusted to life in France. Karen must have assumed he was just a kind colleague of mine. Normally, anyone would have realized that no colleague would go to such lengths. But Karen, who took help for granted, clearly hadn't considered that possibility. So, I asked Kevin to get Mom and Dad's money back. And I've told him to stop helping you from now on. You'll have to figure things out on your own.
What? I don't even speak French. I quit my jobs, and now I don't have any money. What am I supposed to do?
Karen's desperate cries echoed through the phone, but I was done falling for her tricks. I would never trust her again. Figure it out yourself. With those final words, I hung up the phone. Karen, now alone in a foreign country. It was at the start of what would truly be her descent into hell. But the one who walked down that path was Karen herself. Until she realizes that it's no one's fault but her own, her life will remain stuck in that hell forever. According to Kevin, Karen has finally started looking for a new job. However, the cafe I had initially introduced to her has already hired another English-speaking staff member, leaving no position available for Karen. Without the time or money to attend her dance school, she seems to have quit altogether. What was the point of moving to France? I can't help but shake my head in disbelief. Currently, Karen works as a cleaning staff member, and Kevin has occasionally seen her at our company's branch office. Whenever Karen spots Kevin, she glares at him. Normally, guilt over her actions would make it impossible to even meet Kevin's eyes, but Karen clearly hasn't learned her lesson yet. With that kind of attitude, she's unlikely to escape her current life anytime soon. Meanwhile, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy in America and later joined Kevin in France.
If you see Karen, just ignore her.
Even my parents seem to have completely given up on Karen, as my mom said this with a laugh. Naturally, I have no intention of helping Karen anymore. I don't know what kind of life Karen will lead from now on, but as her sister, I believe I did everything I could to support her. That's why, from this point forward, I'll focus on myself and my family, without letting Karen's actions burden my mind. Looking forward to our life as a family of 3, I set off for a new chapter, determined to find happiness.